Hello again, lockpicking Paul here, and tonight I've got a Baton Dimple Camlock, and this really is just tiny, 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 tiny. Just for scale, I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll zoom in, give you the scale. This is a Garrison multi-lock. Look at the size of a keyway compared to the size of a keyway on this one. There is very little room to maneuver in here, and even less when you get a tensioner in it. So you do have to improvise a bit with the tools, which is what I'll show you in a minute with the picking. This is a bit of an interesting lock. Batons aren't rubbish at all. This has got 6 pins, so it's more, certainly one more pin than I would normally expect to find in a small camlock. And it's got balanced stacks. So the driver pins correspond to the key pin length. So they all sort of line up, which makes things a little tougher. But it's also a nod to the fact that this is a little better engineered than your average camlock. It's not got the greatest tolerances, but most of the security is in the fact that getting a pick into that keyway is really quite tough. You haven't got much room to play with at all. So I can get that in there. You haven't got all the room, and it's mostly around the height of the pins, which are almost touching the top of the keyway. So I'll explain a bit more when it comes to the picking, but I've had to use a curved flag and crush it in a vise. So I've still got a slight hook on it, which I need, because it's got to sort of navigate around that top warding and tap down on the pins. It's absolutely a tricky little pick. So I'm going to get this set up on a vise. I'm going to have to film it from a very strange angle just to give myself enough room to maneuver. It's quite a delicate pick. You can't sort of clang around and push too hard because it will overset. So I'm going to be right back with this set up, and we'll gut it as well, which the gutting is infinitely harder than the picking because the pins are so tiny, and they are much smaller than padlock pins, so it's super fiddly. Anyway, back in a moment with the picking. Right, so we're going to try and get this open. Word on the tools, I've had to improvise a bit because this keyway is so tiny. So this is it's a multipick curved flag, and I've crushed it in a vise a little bit. Let's see if we can zoom in on that. Maybe we can't. So you've still got some extra reach, and you've still got a little bit of curve, but it's a lot flatter for getting in and out of this narrow keyway. And this is the tension of it comes with a 29-piece dual gauge set, and it just happens to fit in here perfectly. If you use a regular style dimple tensioner like this, it just doesn't leave you any space in here to actually pick with. So, with tensioning, anything goes, and if it works, it works. Now, it just so happens in this lock, this tensioner works a treat. Now, this is as fiddly as it gets. So I'll go quite slow. It'll take a couple of passes. It normally does. So you've got what looks like a false set. There are no security pins in this lock. So I think that's a sort of case of the tolerances aren't fantastic, but it's got a lot else going for it. Slightly deeper fall, so I think it's another pin that's gone through. tension's very, very light. These pins in this thing bind up very tightly, and of course with so little room to maneuver, you can't get flying in and out. You can actually see me, I'm peering underneath the camera to pick this. Back the tension right off, so I'm barely resting on it. Right, let's go in through front and do every pin. Everything feels set. So I've got one pin which is not quite through. Just got to find it. I think I've dropped a pin now. Got it back. It's more like keyhole surgery than picking a lock. I wonder if that first pin was a problem. Yeah, it was. There you go. It was the first pin that was a problem. Right, so, good Lord, that was a shocking long time. 6 minutes, blimey. Okay, let's get this gutted and show you what's inside it. Right, so, let's undo this. Right, so it's got tiny little circlip on it. Let's get this apart. There we go. Fiddly as it gets. Right. A little bit. Okay, so I have had this apart before. So what I did need to do though is make a follower. This one's got a hole in it which just happens to fit over that tailpiece. Without that, it all ends badly. Yeah, I didn't use a shim last time. There you go. So there you go, 6 pins. And they're all, I'm going to take one out because they're all standards. There's nothing special with these. They're just, actually, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take them all out because really one of the most interesting features about this lock is it's got balanced stacks. which I was not expecting to see, but I suppose, you know, it's a Baton's pretty good make, so maybe you would expect to see that. Okay, so nothing like threading or countermilling in there. But the other interesting thing is these are the world's smallest driver pins. They are just ridiculous. That's where the pins are, right there. So now the springs are attached to the drivers. Isn't that just the tiniest pin ever? It makes a padlock driver pin look huge. So yeah, bonkers. Yeah, I fired another spring across the room. These springs just seem to just like to launch themselves. Chances of me finding that somewhere between none and none. So I'll stick another copper spring in there. Here you go. Business of gutting locks with tiny, tiny pins. I'll just show you these. So there's not much variation in the heights of those driver pins, but they correspond to the length of the key pins. So effectively, they are balanced stacks, which probably makes this lock a bit more tricky than it would otherwise be. It doesn't have the highest tolerances, but it does put up quite a good fight, largely due to the fact that it is so tough to navigate and you've got to modify your tools to fit in it. So yeah, cool. The Baton 6-pin Dimple lock, Camlock. Awesome. All right, that's it. Sorry it took so long, and now I've got to go and play Hunt the Spring or Replace the Spring. Anyway, enjoy your picking. Cheers.